Hello, hello. We're here today with the results of a metagame poll that I did a week or two back. This is much like the one I did back in December, November, something like that of last year. So we had a pretty good time to do another one. Big picture kind of thing, and I'll alternate between, doing these and doing those top prospects videos every few months kind of thing. And for those who haven't seen the first one, the basic gist of this is I asked people, what are the top 5 characters you're considering for upcoming competitive events? If you had to pick 5 characters and say, I'm going to run one of these 5, what would that list look like? And this gets a little bit deeper than just, people trying to say, here's the one thing that I know I'm running. It gets a little more into... Because there's lots of decks, most people are bouncing between 2 or 3 decks before an event, right? And so this gets a little bit deeper in terms of what are people in the aggregate more likely to play than not. And so I thought it's an interesting way to do a poll. And so this will cover the upcoming, we have the Jacksonville community run cash event coming up this coming weekend. We've got the Louisville Regional in July, any Gen Con events, any local championships, anything between now and the release of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, basically. The Street Fighter characters are in here. We obviously haven't seen most of the cards from those decks yet. So, interest in those characters will be a little more perspective, right? And any other characters that might be buffed by stuff in here, who knows, right? But, a good overview, for people who haven't been following too tight, who aren't like in all the discords or whatever. And, there's could be some surprises here anyway, even to people who do think they're paying a lot of attention. So, to get started, the elephant in the room, or the cart titan in the room, 52% of respondents said that they are considering Peak Finger as a possible deck. This is probably not a huge surprise. Peak is a very generically impressive character. Combined with her asset gives a total of +3 speed, +3 damage, or -3 speed, -3 damage to every move, with the caveat being that you are blowing the bejesus out of your stage. But, there's cards like Colossus SWAT, like Lightning Rod, that can kind of help mitigate that a little bit, some Death Foundations that replace themselves when you blow them up. So people trying to run some things like those, and just, generic, big stat stick both ways, 6-hander, is going to have people's attention for sure. There were 50 responses to this poll exactly, so we get a lot of nice round numbers here. 26 out of 50 said that they might run Peak as a potential upcoming deck. That does not mean it will be 50% of a given field. But, if you take law of averages even, it might mean it's only, 10% or so, although I imagine she'll be a little bit higher than that if you figure she's 1/5 of people's lists. But far and away, the most popular response, and for pretty clear reasons. Not necessarily the best character in the game, so to say. I don't know how many... Some people probably think that, but I don't know how many people who answered this do. It's just clearly a very good character. After that, we get a bit more gradation going down, but the next 3 that stand out, we have in the low 20s each for a bunch of 7-handers. We have Rodan, Annie Awakened, and Jamie Sue from the Street Fighter set. All, 7-handers that give or take away impressive stats in some way, shape, or form. Rodan's ± speed. Annie is ± damage on her other side, and also has a lot of built-in momentum. Jamie ramps up to 4/4 and everything. So, clearly stats get people's attention these days. There's not a whole lot of tricksiness going on here. Just here's a bunch of 7-handers that give a bunch of raw strats. All possible things you might likely see show up. Following from there, in the 18% tier, we have Izuku Midoriya on the move, Deku 6. We have Pony, and Armin Arlert, Power of the Colossus. This is the new Armin that gets to play cards face down. Any card face down is a foundation of 2 difficulty. Those Dekus getting a little bit of a buff from one of the Street Fighter cards we have seen, which is a 1/5 that can stop damage reduction, which helps feed into his potential all-in on 1 flash attack plan. I think a lot of these Deku decks now are not going 100% in on, this is the only way I'm going to win the game. They're all going to pack it, but we're seeing a little bit more flexing of like, okay, well, if that's not going to work for whatever reason, I want to make sure I have, enough attacks and other routes to winning the game in here. But still certainly his big premium play. Pony is Pony. She's been around for a while. She builds up counters and plays a really long string while clearing her card pool. She lost any means necessary with rotation, but picked up some other tools. There's some Hunter Allies plays with Kiyomi that people are doing. May or may not have a little bit more of an ally toolbox. Usually built as a pure aggro, try to go off on turn 2 or 3 type deck, but she can be played more defensively if you want to lean into that. Looks very different either way. Defensively, she gets -2 speed and can change zones. Offensively, it's mostly the pool clear with some +2 speeds when she can spare the counters. So it can be built a number of different ways, can be built on different symbols. There's a lot of different versions of Pony out there, so that's not a surprise. And then Armin. So Armin has mainly this play foundations face down thing means you get to play Outwit cards, and there's a bunch of powerful Outwit cards in the Attack on Titan 3 set that he gets to make use of. A lot of Armins aren't too concerned with getting to the flip side. It's there, but it's not too worried about Unyielding Destruction, if I'm not mixing up the name, the card that sets both people down to 4 foundations. So that's kind of a trend, is that most of the characters people are looking at are at least theoretically okay if that card gets popped off on them, because that's kind of a big shadow on the metagame right now. We don't know how many people are going to be trying to run decks with that card, but you have to be aware of it. So Armin, importantly, doesn't necessarily have to flip over. He can still get 2 damage and a bunch of unflips on his front side, and that is fine. There's a bunch of cards that are good to unflip. Your Outwits unflip themselves, and then they flip down for damage. And you can kind of make things work. Fire in Order is a good symbol pairing, has access to a lot of, good attuned cards and, good options on either symbol that you want to main there. So a lot of people are working on builds of Armin for sure. Up next, at the round 15%, we have Porco Galliard, the Ryu from the new Street Fighter decks, Allura, King Ghidorah, and Godzilla. Ghidorah and Godzilla, the least surprising here, they're kind of always going to be around. There's always going to be people that are interested in these characters. Probably don't need to talk about them too much. You've probably seen them locally if your Locals has been around for any length of time. Allura is an interesting pickup. So we haven't seen much of any success from Alluras, but there's a lot of people interested in workshopping Alluras. There's not only the actions in the Critical Role set, but, some new actions that continue to come out that she could feasibly put in her momentum. The notion of sealing an attack gets a little bit better and better as we go on. There's, more and more attacks with powerful blitz abilities, and you think of, Falling Titans is a really good one to seal Unyielding Destruction. For instance, if a deck's really leaning on that, Allura can say no to it. And, people have been playing with the Filled with Doubt action card and seeing how powerful sealing an attack could be, and that might be increasing interest in this character. And, 3 good symbols, Chaos and Life, both Attack on Titan symbols with a bunch of attuned cards. Void has some from Critical Role and from Star Trek, so another character where there's lots of different ways to build her. Be interesting to see if any of these actually show up and start to place, because it's been around long enough for now that if someone's really been working on her for months and months and months, we might start to see those results soon. Porco is a weird one. This is another Attack on Titan 3 character that isn't necessarily that interested in flipping. People are using low difficulty attacks like Besiege and teaming with the Attack Titan. They're using cards like Titan Armbar and other things that have effects when they're card pool, or foundations that don't count as progressive when they're in your card pool, or that sort of thing. To kind of take a 4 attack string or 3 attack string and put one in with Mighty Blitz and turn it into, a 4, 5, 6 attack string. So long as they can find ways to keep passing checks, they can keep picking up attacks and just make a really long string, almost like like a pony deck might, only in this case the cards are actually in the card pool and you're getting stats from your various effects that are running around. So pretty impressive when it goes off and things go right. I think most of them are pretty full send glass cannon aggro type lists right now, but we've only seen a couple at a webcam event, that kind of thing. And then Ryu says draw 3 cards on him. After any attacks completely back to you, draw 3 and then stack your deck, and that activates a lot of people's brainworms. Right, just the 32 health, get lots of cards, some damage on face, figure it out. I couldn't tell you what anybody's Ryu deck looks like. I don't think I've seen one yet, but I imagine it's some form of just playing good cards, right? And then the next grouping, see, we got a little bit more characters in the 10% or higher bracket on this poll than there was in the other one, which is it sort of feels like a wider metagame, but in some cases it's more narrow because you have a lot less characters that are getting 1 or 2 responses each. But in any case, we have William Anderson III, new champ card. Gets to move a lot of cards around, and people like moving cards around for benefits. Hanj Zoe Four Eyes, who is the character that won Worlds and has no particular reason to go away. That character is still just fundamentally good. Zeke Yeager is the first of... We'll see a few of these backup-themed characters with all the new Jaegerist support and other stuff in the new Attack on Titan set that really make the idea of playing a deck that plays lots and lots of backups feel more viable than it has been before this set. And Zeke seems to be the most popular pick for people looking to go in on that angle. Bakugo 4, who had a nice showing in OCE. Kind of an interesting place right now. There's a fair amount of damage reduction in this meta. Between the backup decks are doing a fair amount of it. You have Hanj Zoe right here in this picture. Peak, of course, can do... I think Peak does -2 damage, and Annie can even do -3 damage, and Bakugo just having baked-in negation for all of that is pretty good. Gets to have a lot of good matchups that way. There's not as much raw card draw as there might have been when he first came out, for instance, so the discard theme is not as bad as it used to be. So he's interesting. On the flip side, actually, finding ways to trigger his damage bonus can be suspect. He can be a little bit inconsistent in terms of his hot draws versus his cold draws, but certainly a character a lot of people are looking at. And then last on this list in the 10% group is the first Mikasa Ackerman from the original Attack on Titan set. This is the one that was errated to only trigger on weapon attacks because she was, so busted when she had access to, any attack under the sun. But they keep printing more weapon attacks, so she just keeps getting better and better. And yeah, much like Pony, you can use Mikasa to, fashion a really, really long string by keep clearing your card pool, and it's just a different selection of attacks that you're doing it with. And, instead of needing to manage counters, via managing cards in your hand, Mikasa similarly benefits from drawing cards because her clear costs a discard, but can just commit a foundation every time something hits to draw a card. And so she gets to play a somewhat different shape in return for not necessarily having the defense that Pony does, but has a little bit more of a potential to be more explosive early in theory, I think. After that, as we go into the smaller percentages, the 6 to 8%, these all got like 3 or 4 looks each. And then I believe we wrap it up after this. I don't think I go any further with people who responded once or twice. But yeah, we have a bunch of backup-themed characters here in Hanj Zoe, the original Hanj Zoe, that gets to start the game with a 9 Titans. This is... Typically, my understanding is right now, this is a 9 Titans and heavy damage reduction, very likely looking to loop Falling Titans type of deck. All the backup theme characters are going to have the Falling Titans loop, I'm almost certain, but there's some Hanjas running around that are really all in on it. And then Beast Titan, Caduceus Clay, also more backup theme characters, more tanky characters. Beast Titan going to draw a bunch of cards, Caduceus just going to keep healing and healing his backups. So you have all of those going on, just a bunch of people looking to do backup theme stuff. Mitch Cimino still has some eyeballs, even though he lost VME. The super grindy defensive Mitch Ciminos are probably a little suspect right now, but he is a character on especially the good and order symbols that kind of makes his own momentum. And that has some compelling features. I was messing around with an echo-heavy Mitch Cimino a little while back. There's a lot of different things you can do with this character, so he's going to be on people's minds probably for the entirety of his legality, in some form or another, even if he may or may not make top cuts for a little while. Tarian, very popular pick for Denver, kind of faded away in Albuquerque, but now we have Unyielding Destruction putting both people at 4 foundations, so playing a character that doesn't need too many of them has its appeal. And then some other hits, we have John Kirstein, after the Vertical Maneuvering Equipment band, is Mr. Vertical Maneuvering Equipment, and he was certainly just fine even before that card win, and now he's, gets that functionality specifically to himself. Getting +3 or -3 speed on every attack and changing its own is good, and generating momentum off of clearing your card pool, which is just get good thing for doing good thing, is also good. He got a little bit of a trick in the Ackerman's team up. I froze on the name a little bit there. With I Am Here, which is a card he was already playing, that attack ends up being quite huge in him. And he's got some other things going on. Lots of cool stuff you can do to get momentum in this character and keep the thing going. Paul Phoenix is starting to get some attention because Street Fighter has some cards that let you attack your opponent on their turn. And Paul Phoenix says that means you get to stun them on their turn, and you get to put damage on that attack, especially. So he's starting to get some attention. Elder Chogro's kind of always around and about, very good defensive character. Kind of going to be hurt by the one diff that we saw previewed. The Water Attuned Street Fighter 1 diff cancels this character, which is kind of messed up. But still, a good 7-hander that gets to, pull things on command out of his discard pile, which is always very good. And then Byakko being Byakko, big cat, lots of health, big damage, flip their stage. Another one that's kind of just going to always be around and about. And that will do it. That will wrap it up for a pretty quick overview of the meta poll. Lots of different characters, different shapes. I do see the running theme of people wanting to make sure that they can operate on relatively few foundations if they have to. That's going to be a bit of a fact of life here for a little while, and we'll see what kind of an impact Unyielding does or doesn't have. Lots of people interested in the backup stuff, lots of people interested, even more people interested in just plain old big dumb stat stick, 7-handers and peak fingers and things like that. So this should give you an idea of what kinds of things to expect. You always be ready for random offbeat stuff that wasn't on this list for sure. People will bring all sorts of things to a regional or otherwise, but in the grand scheme of things, this is the stuff that's probably the most likely. All right, thanks for watching, and enjoy the upcoming competitive season, and have a nice day.